Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Parampara. Sukte ahami na drishyante dukkha dosha pravrittayah atah tasyaiva sansarah name sansartru sakshinah. This up to here we are done in our last session, 10th shloka. In our last session we saw the all-pervasive nature of the self or Atman. In the 6th shloka it was said, Abharupasya Vishwasya Bhanam Bhasan Nidhervina Kadachit na avakalpeta bha cha aham tena sarvagah. So all pervasive nature was given here, that the world is jada inert and the objects therein are also inert. Objects cannot know others nor itself. So there has to be a consciousness which should illumine its existence. Now, the all-pervasive nature, we have taken an example also of electricity and electrical gadget like bulb. So if electricity is there, if a bulb is there functioning somewhere, that means electricity has to be there. Any electrical gadget that is functioning in any corner of this world, electricity has to be there. Similarly, if there is an awareness of existence of anything in anywhere in this creation, that means the consciousness has to be there. Without consciousness, that awareness of the existence cannot be there, existence of that particular object. So as electricity, wherever the electrical gadgets are functioning, electricity is definitely there. So also, if the awareness of existence of any object is there anywhere, that means consciousness is very much there, if it is known. Then in the 7th shloka, it was said that whatever the line of argument that was taken is that if the creation is from Brahman, so it has to be real, because Brahman is real, so the creation has to be real. So then how can, if the creation is real, then how can Brahman be Advaita, non-dual? So then the thing is that from conscious self, insentient objects cannot come. Insentient object cannot create itself. So if existence of objects are seen, if this creation is seen, then it has to be only a superimposition. That's all. It is only an appearance. It is only a superimposition. Similarly, like gold is the reality, the ornaments are superimposition on the gold. The reality is gold. It is just, the ornaments are just an appearance on the substratum called the gold. So similarly, it is only an appearance, and therefore the non-duality of Brahman remains intact, because nothing can come out of it. Insentient objects cannot come out of it. And therefore, if it is seen, then it is only a superimposition. It is only an appearance. There is no reality to that. Then in the 8th shloka, it was completely said that it was shown that how to shift our identification and realize I am not the body and the senses, etc. That na deha, na indriyam, cha aham, na prana, na mana, na buddhi, mamata parirabdhatvad, akridatvad, idam dhiya. So to shift our focus or shift our identification from the body, the sense organs, mind, intellect, and so on, the line, the argument or the sadhana that was given is that they belong to the two thoughts. That is mindness, my thought, and idam thought. Mama vritti and idam vritti, my thought, and idam thought, this thought, idam vritti. So all that comes under the purview of my thought or this thought doesn't belong to me. I am not that. That is how we shift our focus and shift our identification. So the body, the sense organs, the mind, the intellect, everything we refer to as mind. So they belong to me, but I am not those. Other things come under the idam vritti, this. The body also comes under the idam vritti only, this body, this hand, this leg, this face, and so on. So whatever comes under the purview of this aham vritti and idam vritti, now this mama vritti and idam vritti, they cannot be I. So this is a simple technique given to shift our focus or shift our identification. Now, in the 9th shloka, one may argue that this ego, ahankar, or this I thought, it does not become object of my thought or this thought. You see? So I thought or this thought, it does not become an object of that I thought or this thought. So therefore, now, hence it could be the self. See, the ego doesn't become an object of I thought or this thought. So maybe the ego is the self. Now to remove this doubt or this argument, in the 9th shloka it was said that Sakshi sarva anvitah preyan aham na aham kadachana parinama parichheda paritapaihi upaplavat. So here, this I thought actually doesn't exist on its own, because I thought manifests where? In the intellect, in the reflected consciousness. So it has got no independent existence as that. So I thought cannot be the self in any case. It has got no independent existence. And who undergoes all kinds of experiences, neither the insentient body nor the pure self. It is this ego which undergoes in between, who is neither here nor there, who appears in its own absence. That is the one who goes to these three type of things: parinama, parichheda, paritapaihi. Parinama, parichheda, paritapaihi. Parinama, it goes through all kinds of modifications. And parichheda, then it has got all sorts of limitations of space, time, objects, possession, and so on. And paritapaihi suffers from three types of tapa that comes from the unknown sources: adidaivik tapa, from the surroundings, adibhautik tapa, and from one's own self, one's body and mind, creating sufferings for this ego. So they all belong to this ego only, not for the self, because the self is always dear, it is above that. So these belong to the self. This the I, the ego, it doesn't belong to the self. Self is always independent of this. So therefore, this I, the ego, cannot be the self, because self is of the nature of existence, consciousness, bliss, Ananda Swarupa. So this self is the Sakshi, ego is the object of this thought, and so on. Whereas the self is the Sarvavyapi, ego is limited to the conditioning it has got, conditioning of the body. Ego is limited to that alone. And the self is Ananda Swarupa. Sakshi is sometimes Sukhi, sometimes Dukhi, and undergoes this Tritapa. That is the problem with the Aham. So Sakshi is always Ananda Swarupa, and I, the ego, is the Sukhi Dukhi and undergoes all this kind of Tapa. The Sansara only belongs to the ego, not to the self. And moreover, self is always existing. Ego is absent in the deep sleep state. So this ego cannot be Atma, plain and simple. Then again, we saw in the 10th shloka, Sukte ahamina dushyante dukkha dosha pravrittayah ata tasyaiva sansara name sanskriti sakshinaha. So in the deep sleep state, there is no experience of misery, sorrow, or pain, or anything like that. So in the deep sleep state, it is absent. But the experience of ephemeral joys and sorrows, pleasure and pain, happiness and miseries, they are experienced only in the dream and the waking state where the ego is active. And whereas in the deep sleep state, it is inactive, it is temporarily absorbed in source, it is in the seed form, unmanifest form. It is not completely destroyed, but it is in an unmanifest form. So this is not experienced, but the self is illuminating the deep sleep experience as well. So therefore, it belongs only to the ego, not to the self, not to Atma. So till here we had seen in our last session. Now we take up a new shloka. Now it may be argued that since the ego is not there in the deep sleep, this state cannot belong to the ego. See how the argument goes. It must be belonging to this witnessing self. It doesn't belong to the ego. Because ego is absent, so to say, temporarily, or it is absorbed in its own source. Now, all the three states of experiences must have a common locus, since they are remembered by a single entity. Since the self is ever present, even in the waking, dream, and the deep sleep state, so this must belong to the self and not to the ego. Now, even the waking and the dream state should belong to the ego. So, because only the self is illuminating all the three states, whereas in deep sleep state, ego is absent. So now this Purva Pakshi or Mr. Nanu is arguing that it must be all the three states should belong to the self and not to the ego. Now, the poet Lakshmidhar Kavi answers in the next verse, 11th verse. Supta suptim na janati, na supte swapna jagarau, jagrat swapna shushupti nam, sakshato hamatad dashaha. Supta suptim na janati, na asupte swapna jagarau, jagrat swapna shushupti nam, sakshi ataha aham atad dashaha. Now, it is the ego who is awake, who is the waker, who is the dreamer, who dreams and who sleeps. You see, supta suptim na janati. The one who is asleep doesn't know the deep sleep state of consciousness because that is not illumined. He is in ignorance there in the deep sleep state. And it is the ego which undergoes the three states of consciousness. That ego itself is the waker, the dreamer, and the deep sleeper. And self is the illuminator of all the three planes of consciousness. Therefore, there is no sleeping or dreaming or waking for Atma, the self. Ego doesn't know the experience of the Sushupti Avastha, the deep sleep state. Consciousness has to illumine the experience of the deep sleep state. Ego doesn't know that. So, consciousness which illumines something has to be apart from that. So, it is illuminating the waking and the dream state also. So, who is going through the experiences? The ego is going through the experience of the being a waker and being a dreamer and being a deep sleeper. So, if the deep sleeper, the ego which is in the deep sleep state, if it knew the experience of the deep sleep state, then it won't be called as a deep sleep, because then there will be a division of knower and the known. If the ego knows, then there is no question of it being in the deep sleep state. It is awake, and the waking or the dream state, one of the two, definitely, because it is of the particular knowledge. Then there is no question of deep sleep state. So the very fact that the ignorance is there, that means he is in the deep sleep state, he doesn't know. Therefore, now, if it does, it won't be the Shushupti Avastha or the deep sleep state, because of the Bheda. There will be a knower-known difference will be there. Consciousness is always, so to say, aware. It is always aware of Shushupti as well as the deep sleep state, as well as the sleeper. You see, or the sleeping ego, one can say. Nisargadatta Maharaj, a great master, realizer of the self from Mumbai, he used to often say that I see the body sleeping. He used to say he sees his body sleeping. So he is apart from the sleeper. He is other than the sleeper, the one who is sleeping. So it was very clear in his mind. So it belongs to the sleeper only. This Sushupti Avastha also belongs to the sleeper and not to the one who is illuminating this sleep state or deep sleep state of Sushupti Avastha. So also this Jagrat and Swapna, they also belong to the waker and the dreamer, not the one who is illuminating the waking state and the dream state. So all the three states belong to the ego, which is the waker, which is the dreamer, which is the sleeper also. So they belong to them and not to the consciousness, the pure self or Atma, which is illuminating them. So the same ego goes to these three states of consciousness. In Sushupti Avastha, in the deep sleep state, this ego is in the unmanifest state or in the seed form. It is not completely destroyed. Had it been completely destroyed, then we will not wake up, or then we will be the realizer of the self, because minus the ego, we are the pure self. So, though we get a glimpse of the nature of that pure self, that is the Paramananda state, a glimpse, because nobody wakes from deep sleep state and says that I was miserable. He says that I enjoyed it. I didn't know anything, but I enjoyed it. There is slight glimpse of that Ananda Swarupa, because in the temporary absence of this ego, the ego is the one which creates the problem. The sorrows, pains, and miseries of the waking and the dream state doesn't touch in the deep sleep state only because of the absence of the ego. Otherwise, this would have been a problem. Now, the Atman is ever awake and illumines the three states of waking, dream, and deep sleep. The three states thus do not belong to the Atman, to the self. Now, this point is further explained, and these three states are briefly defined in the next shloka, in the 12th shloka. Vijnana virati suktihi tajjanma swapna jagarau tat sakshina katham me syuhu nitya jnanasya te trayah. Vijnana viratihi suktihi tat janma swapna jagarau tat sakshina katham me syuhu nitya jnanasya te trayah. Now, Vijnana viratihi, that is cessation of knowledge, particular knowledge, all direct, particular direct knowledge. Suptihi, tad janma swapna jagara. So absence of or cessation of or absence of a particular direct knowledge is called as deep sleep state, and rising of the particular direct knowledge is called as a dream and the waking state. Tad sakshina katham me syuhu nitya jnanasya te trayah. So now, Sakshi or the self or the Atma is of the nature of knowledge, pure knowledge. This knowledge is vritti rahit knowledge. When there is a knower and something to be known as this idam, it is called as particular knowledge. This is what happens in the dream state and the waking state of consciousness. Example, I know this is a dream. I know this. So knowing is in the dream state and only in the waking plane of consciousness. Its absence, its cessation or its absence is the deep sleep state. That is, I do not know anything. That is the deep sleep state of consciousness. And then, so these are the three states. Knowing or direct particular knowledge of something is dream and the waking plane. I don't know anything is the deep sleep state. And I know myself, that is samadhi. Aham Brahmasmi. That is the samadhi state, Sakshi. Now, the one who is the witness of this rising of the particular knowledge or cessation of this knowledge. So rising of the particular knowledge is the dream and the waking state. Cessation or absence of this knowledge is the deep sleep state. The one who is witness of this. So he is apart from these three planes of consciousness. These three planes of consciousness do not belong to that entity. So I am pure, thought-free, objectless awareness, which does not rise or fall or grow or die. This is always nitya, always there. So this knowledge is always there. Awareness, thought-free, objectless awareness is always there, illumining everything without being affected by anything. In the waking and the dream state, I, the ego, is the knower of things and beings. In the waking and the dream state, I get affected by what I see, what I experience through the sense organs, mind, and intellect. But the self, the pure self, as an illuminator, doesn't get affected. Sun, as the illuminator, doesn't get affected by what it illumines. But the ego definitely gets affected by what it sees, what it knows in the dream and the waking state, and its absence in the deep sleep state doesn't affect it. But its knowledge of the waking and the dream state does definitely affect the ego and becomes sometimes miserable, sometimes happy, and so on. Now, there is a question. This Brahman is without modification, that is nirvikara, but I have modification. I am born, I grow, I exist, I grow, and I die, and so on. How can therefore I be Brahman? This is what happens when identification is wrong and wrong things are taken as a self, then this kind of doubts will come. Then how can I therefore be Brahman? The Vedantin answers that no, I do not have any modifications. So in the 13th shloka, that is clarified. Shad vikaravatam veta nirvikaro hamanyatha tad vikaranusandhanam sarvatha navakalpate. Shad vikaravatam veta nirvikara aham anyatha tad vikara anusandhanam sarvatha na avakalpate. So Shad Vikara. What is the Shad Vikara? The sixfold modifications. What are the sixfold modification? I am born, then a jiva is born, it exists, it grows, then the old age, disease and death. The modification, disease and death. So this is what goes, decay and death. So these are the 6 modifications that the body goes through. So being the knower of those, Shadvikaraha, I am outside the field of change. You see? So I am the knower of the Shadvikara, isn't it? The birth is happening and the existence and the growth that goes, and then the old age, disease and death. Now, birth of the thought I illumine in the mind. Birth of the modification in the body and the mind and the intellect as the thought or the emotions or the various modifications of the body, I illumine. I am the illuminator of the changes. They undergo the changes. I am the knower of the changes. And as a knower of the changes, I have to be outside the field of the change to know the change. So if I have to know the pot undergoing the change, I have to be an entity other than the pot. If I have to know that body is undergoing change, I have to be an entity other than the body. We have seen this many times. This is also one of the knower of the changes is other than the entity undergoing change. So this also we have taken as a reason why we cannot be the body. One of the 14 reasons that come in that also. So being the knower of this Shad Vikara, the 6-fold modifications, I am outside the field of change. Now, a constantly changing entity cannot know itself or others. A constantly changing body cannot know itself or a constantly changing mind, intellect, and senses, and so on. Similarly, a constantly changing mind cannot know the modifications of the body and the intellect, and a constantly changing intellect cannot know the constantly changing mind and the body, the modifications taking place there. So, if the body, mind, and intellect has constantly changed, modified, and their knowledge is known to me, then I have to be an entity other than the body, the sense organs, the mind and its contents, the intellect and its contents. I have to be an entity other than that. So therefore, they do not belong to me. Sarvatha na avakalpate. So it is not possible to imagine. So this vikara, there is another reason also. If I am also undergoing the change, I am subject to modification, I will not have memory of the sequence of modification. So to have the memory and knowledge of the sequence of modification, I have to be other than that entity undergoing the change. So I am free from the Shad Vikara. Otherwise, the memory of those Vikara is in no way possible to imagine unless I am other than that undergoing the change. Now, the changeless nature of Atma is taken up again. Are the modifications that the things undergoing modification different, or are they one and the same? Modification and things undergoing the modification. If they are different, there can never be any relationship between them. Then is the thing itself the modification and the modification itself the thing? Does the change which itself is the thing that rises and disappears from moment to moment? Now, this is what is a doubt expressed. Now, the clarification comes in the 14th shloka. Tena tena hi rupena jayate liyate muhu vikari vastunastesham anusandhatruta kutah. Tena tena hi rupena jayate liyate muhu vikari vastunah tesham anusandhatruta kutah. Now, tena tena hi rupena, successive forms. Now, jnata, that is the knower, is conscious, is of the nature of consciousness, illuminator. And jnaya, that is object known, is jada, inert. This insentient, inert, non-living jada vastu is subject to modification, not consciousness. Therefore, there is a jada chetan bheda is there. The sentient, insentient difference is there. Now, argument here given, the argument is that there is no such bheda. That is what the argument is there, Purva Pakshi's argument. Consciousness arises as the object every moment and disappears, and consciousness is not nitya and avikari. So this is what the argument is, that consciousness arises with the object and disappears with the object. It is not nitya, it is only temporary. So, and it is not avikari, it is subject to modification. It is not changeless, but subject to modification. Now, this is the argument. If this is true, then the modification and its sequence will not be known. If this was true, if consciousness arises with the object and disappears with the object, then the modification and its sequence will never be known at all. So the very fact that the modification is known, its sequence is also known, so that consciousness cannot arise with the object and disappear with the object. The knower of the modification and its sequence cannot arise with the object and disappear with the object. You see. Moreover, where from this consciousness arises? This is also a question. So, and where does this go to? Does this consciousness arise from an insentient object or from another consciousness? Where does this go to? It goes to. Does it go back to an insentient object, or it goes back into consciousness, or where does it go through? If it is said that, if it is argued that consciousness arises with the object and disappears with the object, where does the consciousness arise from? From an insentient object or from consciousness? From where does it arise from? So that is Jada or Chetana. This Kshanikavadin, this is called a Kshanikavadin. That is Muhuhu, that is every moment the objects arise with the consciousness and disappears with the consciousness, and that is nothing permanent there. This is what the Kshanikavadin says. One branch of Buddhism, they talk about Kshanikavada. So this Kshanikavada cannot answer this particular doubt, this question. Therefore, scriptures tell us that the substratum is Nitya. On this Nitya, eternal substratum, everything is projected. The insentient objects, they are projected there, which is subject to change. There is a play of Jada Vastu, that is the insentient object, as mere appearance. It is only projected, or it is only superimposed. That's all. So therefore, this argument cannot hold water here, that every moment the consciousness arises with the object and disappears with the object, perishes with the object, rather. So that cannot hold here, because one has to know the very knowledge of the existence of object, modification, the sequence of modification. Then there has to be a knower which is Nitya and not disappearing every moment, not Kshanika. So, having said that, now one may say that this Atma is having modification. See what tricks our mind can play. One may say that this Atma is having modification and knows its own modification also and others' modification also. Both Atma and the objects have changes, but the speciality of Atma is that it knows its own modification, it knows other objects' modification also. Both. And the example the mind will quote, Nanu Maharaj will quote, is that just as a jewel distinguishes itself by illumining itself and illumining other stones also. So, Atman illuminates its own changes also and others' changes also. So, this doubt is answered by saying that there are two changes which even Atman cannot illuminate. What are these two changes? They are its own birth and its own death. If it is said that Atma is something which can illumine its own changes and changes taking place in others, then the thing is that Atma, if the Atma arises with the object and then perishes with the object, it illumines its own changes and it illumines others' changes also. Now the thing is that Atma also cannot illuminate its own birth. In that case, Atma will not be able to illuminate its own birth, its own death also. The funny thing is that now this clarification and the changes in between, how is it possible to illuminate the changes in between? Now, in the 15th shloka, it is said, Nacha swajanma nasham va drushtum arhati kaschana tauhi prag uttara bhava charam pratham akshanam. Nacha swajanma nasham va drushtam arhati kaschana tauhi prag uttara abhava charama prathama kshanam. Now, the argument that consciousness is subject to modification and is knower of its own modification as well as others' modification is negated here now. How it is negated here? No one can know one's own birth or death. That is, Prag abhava and pradvansa abhava. That is prior non-existence and posterior non-existence. So before birth, there was non-existent. This Atma was non-existent. And then after that, it will be non-existent. Suppose it is taken as it rises with the objects and disappears with the object, perishes with the object. So it will not be able to illumine the birth because it was absent. It is not there before birth. And then it will not be there after death. So these two factors cannot be illumined because it becomes non-existent after that. So it cannot be illumined, birth and death. So the illumination is not possible. Then how can it illumine modification that changes, that takes place in others? Its own birth and death cannot be illumined by itself because it didn't exist before birth. It will disconnect. It will not exist after death also. If it is subject to modification, it will not exist after that. How will it illuminate itself and others? So modifications of others cannot be. Therefore, we have to accept that consciousness illumines all without itself undergoing any modifications whatsoever. It illumines everything, but without itself undergoing any change, any modification. Moreover, now as regards the birth and death is concerned, it cannot illumine its own death. In the fourth shloka, it has been already established that it is imperishable. In the fourth shloka, it was established it is imperishable. 3 ways it cannot be killed, not by the own self, nor by others, nor by any weapons. It was established like that. It is imperishable. So only that which is not created in time cannot be destroyed in time. So that which is not created in time cannot be destroyed in time means that which is not created in time means it has got no birth, which cannot be destroyed in time means it has got no death. So there is no question of illumining birth or death of itself. It has always been. So it is not possible. So that was proven beyond doubt that it is imperishable. It is always existing and nothing can destroy it. Not only that, it illumines everything, whatever is present and their absence also. It illumines the experiences, the waking world as well as the dream world and their absence in the deep sleep state. Both the waking world and the dream world, their absence in the dreams, deep sleep state of consciousness. So there is this abhava is there of these experiences of waking in the dream world. Now the thing is that mirage water is atyanta abhava. Then anyonya abhava is absence of one thing another thing. That is called as anyonya abhava. Mirage water is an example of atyanta abhava, that it doesn't exist at all, it only appears there, atyanta abhava. And whereas this world has got a relative reality. So it is there as long as our vision is through the limited upadhis, the conditionings. So as long as that is there, we experience the world. As long as we are a dreamer in the dream state, the dream world is there. As long as we are waker in the waking plane of consciousness, perceiving through the limited conditionings, upadhis, we experience this waking world as well. Now, having said that, this argument was again shot down, that because this Atma cannot undergo any modification and as well as illumine its own modification and others' modification. That is not possible. Now here, another argument is coming up. What is the opponent saying now? This is the beauty of Vedanta. Everything is discussed step by. There is no aspect left without discussion, without argument. If any doubt is there, that is expressed and then it is negated, eliminated. Now the opponent says, Purva Pakshi says that the knowledge of the identity of Brahman and Atman, which was discussed so far, even if it is possible to gain, will serve no purpose at all. That is what the Purva Pakshi says. So even if I say that Atman and Brahman, Atma or Brahman and one, Brahmatmekya, that is Bodha is there, they are one, it will not serve any purpose. Now the Vedantin says that it does serve the purpose of eliminating this perceived world or samsara, perceived world of change, samsara, which is full of sorrow. Now the opponent Purva Pakshi argues. What is the argument now? No, this samsara cannot be eliminated because it is experienced due to the conditionings of the body, mind, and ego, which are the effects of ignorance. And this ignorance cannot be dispelled by knowledge. Knowledge can dispel a thing that is imagined and not that which is real. For example, knowledge can dispel the illusion of a snake. Knowledge, snake knowledge that is imagined by someone on the rope, but this knowledge cannot dispel the rope. The rope is real, snake knowledge was illusion, rope is real. Ignorance that has caused the conditioning is not an imagination, because we cannot point out anyone who has imagined it. Now you see where the line of argument is going. Ignorance that has caused the conditioning is not an imagination, because we cannot point out anyone who has imagined this. Who has imagined the ignorance? It cannot be the ego, because it itself is a product of ignorance. Nor can it be the immutable Atma. Since it is not an imagination, now the argument goes like this: since it is not an imagination, it must be real. And this real cannot be negated by the knowledge. How can knowledge dispel a real ignorance? A real ignorance. If ignorance is not dispelled, how can samsara be eliminated? This is how our mind works. All types of tarka and kutarka and vitarka will be put forward. Now, all these arguments are valid if there is such a thing called ignorance. This is the important aspect. Now, this Purva Pakshi is assuming that there is ignorance, which is real, on the basis that no one has imagined it. Because it has not imagined it, he says that it is real. The Purva Pakshi says that it is real. We deny the very existence of this ignorance. The following verse shows that no ignorance can ever touch the Atman. What is the shloka? 16th shloka. Na prakashehamityuktihi yat prakashaika bandhana swaprakasham tamatmanam aprakasha katham spushet. Na prakashe aham iti uktihi yat prakasha eka bandhana swaprakasham tam atmanam prakasha katham spushet. Now here, illuminator is always different from that which is illumined. Na prakashe aham iti uktihi yat prakashe eka bandhana. So, and then swapna prakasham tam atmanam, swaprakasham tam atmanam prakasha katham spushet. So, aprakasha katham spushet. So, this illuminator is always different from that which is illumined. Therefore, illuminator is untouched by that, by the illumined, that by that which it illumines. Now, the cloud is seen in the sunlight. So, in the sunlight, the cloud is seen, but clouds can't touch the sun, nor it can cover the sun. Sunlight, it illumines the cloud. Cloud cannot cover the sun, nor can the cloud touch the sun. So similarly, the illuminator, now cloud cannot touch the illuminator, the sun, nor can it cover the sun. Similarly, the object that is being illumined by the illuminator, the consciousness, this object cannot touch this illuminator, nor can it cover the illuminator. It is untouched by that which it illumines. Now, I don't know self, I don't know Atma, is of course ignorance, ajnana. But ajnana vritti has to be illumined by consciousness. I don't know something and I know something. So I know is the jnana vritti, I don't know is the ajnana vritti. I don't know something that is thought of ignorance, and I know something that is thought of knowledge. But both are thoughts. And these thoughts have to be illumined by consciousness, both knowledge, the thought of knowledge as well as the thought of ignorance. I don't know and I know. Both have to be illumined by consciousness, by Atma. So it also means that this illuminator is apart from that which it illumines. It is untouched by that which it illumines also. So therefore, it is untouched by ignorance. Ignorance is only a thought. So it is untouched by ignorance. So it illumines both the thoughts, thought of ignorance, thought of knowledge, and it is untouched by both thought of knowledge as well as thought of ignorance. It is untouched by that. So, because they are of the opposite nature, ignorance and pure consciousness, they are of opposite nature, so it cannot touch. Ignorance cannot touch this pure consciousness, which is of the nature of pure awareness, thought-free objectless awareness. So therefore, it is untouched by ajnana, being of opposite nature. It cannot, so ignorance can't exist in Atma. So in whom is the ignorance? Ignorance cannot exist in Atma. And the body, mind, and intellect equipment, they are the inert objects. The ignorance cannot be there. It is only in this ego which arises in between. This ego only says, I know and I don't know. This is what it is. So it is only this ego which is in ignorance. So just as the cloud can't exist in the sun, so also consciousness illumines both vritti sahit, jnana and ajnana. That is, of knowledge as well as ignorance is only thought. So ignorance thought is there, knowledge thought is there, both are there, and the Atma or the pure self or the consciousness illumines these two and itself remains untouched by that. I don't know and I know. In Kenopanishad, in chapter 3, mantra 3, it is said that yasya matam tasya matam matam yasya na vedasaha. So here it means that the one who says that I have understood, I have not understood, and the one who says that he has understood, he has not understood, has understood. So what is the correct understanding? The correct understanding is simple. I have understood that it cannot be understood because this is simply not an object of knowledge. Atma is not an object of knowledge. Therefore, it is not to be understood. One has to become aware of that. So it cannot be understood as an object of knowledge. So I understand that it cannot be understood. That is the correct knowledge. I understood or I didn't understand. Both are not the correct one. I understand that it cannot be understood as we understand an object of knowledge. So, and this self is the illuminator of everything. The ignorance thought as well as the thought of knowledge, both it illumines. Now, having said this, if Atma is of the nature of knowledge, how can there be the feeling of ignorance? If Atma is of the very epitome of pure knowledge, nature of pure blissful knowledge, why there is a feeling of ignorance? It is said that even though the sun is all light, but for the owls, there is darkness all around. All through the day, daytime, in reality, there is no ignorance. You see, for the owls, daytime, it is all darkness. They can't see during the day because their eyes are designed in such a way that they can see very well in the darkness. So the sun is shining very well, but it can't see anything. So similarly, this is now In reality, there is no such thing as ignorance. But in the 17th shloka it is said, Tathapya bhati kopyesha vichara bhava jivanah avashyayashchidakashe vichararkodayavadhi. तथा अपि अभाति कह अपि एष विचार अभाव जीवनः अवश्यायाः चिदाकाशे विचार अर्क उदय अवधि. Now here with an example things are explained. Now the thing is that really there is no ignorance. This is what the thing is. Now the example given here is that avashayaha. Avashayaha is mist or fog in the akasha, in the space. A mist is seen or a fog is seen, but it is intangible. Intangible in the sense that we cannot touch it or catch it or hold it. It is like a wall, but we can pass through it. We cannot see through that. There is no vision. We cannot see through that. It is all foggy and misty. We cannot see at a few feet also. We cannot see anything. We cannot sweep it also. Only when the sun rises, with the heat of that sunlight, it gets cleared. So also this ignorance can be negated through inquiry, through knowledge, through proper inquiry through knowledge. Ajnana is anirvachaniya. As regards ignorance is concerned, we have always seen this. It is anirvachaniya, inexplicable. Why it is inexplicable? Because the thing is that if we say it exists, it is real, if we say that, ignorance can be negated by knowledge. So with knowledge, it becomes non-existent. And if it becomes non-existent, then it is unreal. But at the same time, we cannot say that it is unreal or non-existent, because we are already experiencing its effect of ignorance. Now, our gross physical body itself is an effect of this ignorance alone. So, we cannot say it is real or unreal. We cannot say it exists or it doesn't exist, because if it exists, then it can be negated by knowledge. If we say that it doesn't exist, we are already experiencing the effects called the gross body, mind, intellect, equipment. This is the effect of ignorance only. So, it cannot be positively or negatively pointed out, these ignorances. So, now this mist remains in space till the sun rises and evaporates it. So also in the Chidakasha, in the space of consciousness, there is this mist of inexplicable ignorance. And this mist of inexplicable ignorance, this can be expelled by proper inquiry. As long as there is no inquiry, this cannot be expelled. You see? So there has to be a proper inquiry. So it can be dispelled by the sun of knowledge through proper inquiry. As the mist can be expelled when the sun rises, with the heat it evaporates and then it gets cleared. Similarly, the sun of knowledge rises, then only it can be expelled. So now, this one of the important thing that we have to note is that this ego, ignorance, maya, mind, they are all synonyms. Ego, ignorance, maya, mind, they are synonymous terms as well as Vedanta, as far as Vedanta is concerned. They have got similar meaning only. Ego, ignorance, maya, mind, they're all the same. Now, the thing is, the Purva Pakshi here, he raises a doubt. If everything is unreal, then what is the status of the Vedas in the scriptures? Vedas or the scriptures, they point out different worlds, different lokas, and how to attain them, how to do punya karma, karma kanda, and then go and enjoy in those lokas and all that thing. They point out different worlds, methods of attaining them. They also point out we are in bondage. We must seek and gain knowledge to liberate ourselves. If Vedas are unreal, then they will lose their authority as a means of knowledge. You see. So if the Vedas also exist in the relative existence, so it has a rule or authority only in the Vyavharik Sat, on the relative existence only. Then how can a Mithya clear another Mithya? So these are the doubts that is raised by Purva Pakshi, because Vedas also belong to this world. Now, how to counter this argument? Vedantin says that when do the Vedas lose their authority or their validity? Before or after gaining knowledge? If after gaining knowledge, the Vedas become meaningless, then it is desirable. Then it is a desirable thing. But before gaining knowledge, they act as a valid means of knowledge to satiate. So the thing is that before gaining knowledge, it acts as valid means of knowledge. In Brahma Bindu Upanishad, there is a mantra which says that Grantham Abhyasya Medhavi Jnana Vijnana Tatparaha Palalamiva Dhanyarthi Tyajed Grantham Asheshatah. So what does it mean that Grantham Abhyasya Medhavi? The intelligent one, he studies the scriptures thoroughly, understand Jnana and Vijnana thoroughly. Grantham Abhyasya Medhavi Jnana Vijnana Tatparaha. And having done that, Tyajed Grantham Asheshat Palalamiva Dhanyarthi, as the desirer of grains, he discards the husk. So also this knower of the self, having understood the knowledge in the scriptures, discards the scriptures as the desirer of grain discards the husk. So if it loses validity after knowing the self, it is a good thing. Because the thing is that if we are on one side of a river, a huge river is there, we are on one side, we want to explore the other side of the river. So we have to cross the river by a boat. We cannot say that I want to give up the boat on this side itself. Then we will not be able to cross the river. So having crossed the river by the boat, having reached the other side, then if we have to explore the other side of the river, then we have to discard the boat on the bank of the river itself. Otherwise, that boat will become a burden for us. We cannot carry the boat and move around. So it will become a burden for us. So when it has to be discarded, having gained knowledge, let it be discarded. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Like in the dream world, when we are in the dream world, if we are hungry, dream food will satiate our hunger. If we have a desire, that desire is fulfilled by the dream objects. And we sometimes have a dream. We dream of a tiger. And the dream tiger is used as a shock to wake us up into waking plane of consciousness. So as the dream tiger shocks us up to wake us up into the waking plane of consciousness, similarly, Vedas, though it may be of belonging to this world, it also acts like a shocker to wake us up to a higher dimension of consciousness. So, in the non-apprehension of ignorance of the self, misapprehension as sufferings, heaven, liberation, and so on arise. Wake up and look out from the self, self alone is. This is clarified in the 18th shloka. This will take up in our next session. Now, in today's session, whatever we have covered, if anybody has got anything to ask, they may ask.
Any question from anybody? Why are you laughing? Hello?
First let us digest.
Very true. Was it too high? No, I don't think so. Because it is a repetition of what we have been doing for so long. But in a different way, maybe. But it is the same thing.
Auntie, what is to be digest, the inert or the sentient?
Don't digest inert or sentient. Just be aware.
Any question from anybody? Anyway, Swamiji, I will go ahead.
Okay. So, no questions from anyone?
It seems so, Swamiji.
Okay, then we'll conclude the session.
No, Swamiji, can you hear me? I have 3 questions.
You have a question?
Three questions.
Okay, go ahead.
The first, actually, in my line of questioning, it is a third number. But since we did this 17th shloka, I am putting it as the first one. Ignorance is not there is very difficult to accept, Swamiji. Ignorance is there.
Yeah, that is why it is anirvachniya, no? It is inexplicable. We can't say it is not there. We can't say it is there also.
Because if ignorance is not there, there is no question of knowledge taking place, isn't it?
Yes. Ignorance is very much there. Ignorance is there as long as we do not have the knowledge. Because knowledge will negate the ignorance. As long as knowledge is not there, ignorance is there. So, we do not have to investigate too much into ignorance. We don't want to people break their heads trying to get the knowledge of ignorance.
Right. Acha, then Swamiji, second question is, consistently in your talk, and we did it in Dragdasha Vivek also, that consciousness, when it comes into the contact with the intellect or say subtle body, it produces I thought. And then produces and illumines the I thought also. Now this I thought illumines the intellect, mind and body.
I thought doesn't illumine the mind and body. Everything is illumined by consciousness alone. This I thought attains the sentiency because of consciousness, and then it identifies with the mind, body, intellect equipment and thinks itself to be that.
Right. So it is the pure consciousness or the self which illumines everything, including ego and other parts of the subtle body.
Yeah, ego doesn't have any existence apart from consciousness.
Right.
So therefore, when the consciousness is reflected only, then the ego is born in that intellect where it is reflected. Without consciousness reflecting on that, ego will also not be born there. If that intellect is not there, which is the reflecting medium, in the absence of reflecting medium, there is no question of this ego also. But then it attains sentiency. It attains sentiency because of consciousness, and then it identifies with the body, mind, intellect equipment, and thinks itself to be that. And it is all real funny thing. The whole thing is that when we start getting deeper and deeper into it, and then we realize that what a fool we have been for millions of lives together.
Yeah. Okay, now the third question is, Swamiji, it's a doubt, not a question, but in the dream tiger, who experiences this? Is it the ego, dreamer, or the what we call a dream ego, which is known as Tejas?
This ego itself, see, ego is active in the dream and the waking state, though it is not active in the deep sleep state. Now the dreamer ego, he is experiencing the tiger. And then he shocked out of that the dream into the waking plane because this tiger chasing him, or the ferocious tiger coming in front of him, and he shocked out of that. So who is that? That is the jiva only. Jiva is experiencing the dream. Consciousness didn't experience that. The jiva is there. So that is one who is experiencing it, and then he wakes up into the waking plane of consciousness. So he snaps out of his dream and into the waking plane of consciousness. So he was scared, but that woke him up. And with the waking up of that, his misery or sorrow or suffering of that tiger also disappears with that, as soon as he wakes up from the dream to the waking plane. So similarly, these Vedas in the waking plane of consciousness helps us to come out of this waking plane of consciousness to awaken to a higher dimension of consciousness by shocking us. It shocks us, isn't it? When certain statements we hear in the Vedas, it shocks us. And that is how it shakes us. And then when we start contemplating over it, we understand the reality of it. Yes, it has to be like that. How it was so simple and how I didn't know. And it shocks us first, and then we realize it that it has to be like that only. It cannot be anything otherwise. And we have been taken for a royal ride for lives together.
So Swamiji, it seems after hearing from you on this world is nothing but play of consciousness.
Yes.
It's a garden in which it is a garden for the consciousness to play within that.
It is a leela, it is a sport, and just enjoy it and don't be carried away. When you are enjoying a movie, you enjoy the movie. You paid money to watch the movie to enjoy it. Okay, and when if you like the movie, if you like the acting of some characters there, they are so real, the character, the sufferings and all that thing, you appreciate their acting and don't start weeping with that character.
Swamiji,
yes,
we say that in deep sleep the ego is latent, and that is why there is no experience of the ego in that state.
no experience of the dream and the waking state sufferings and pain and miseries.
Correct, but ego is indirectly enlivened through the Chidabhasa because of the subtle body. So would it not be appropriate to also state that part of the subtle body is latent during the deep sleep, because Pancha Prana is on, that is not stopping, but we are not aware of it.
No, the subtle body is also latent only. It is in laya state. Ego is not destroyed, nor the subtle body, nor the gross body. They are all in latent state, but it is not available for experience because the subtle body is very much there in the. It is available for experience in the dream state of consciousness.
Yeah.
How to dream it? Because the mind is active there, but mind is also ceases to be active in the deep sleep state.
Yeah, so this is specifically related to deep sleep only, because the other two is understood, but specifically in deep sleep.
So deep sleep it is not there, and therefore ego is also not manifest. Ego
but then if in deep sleep it is latent, then how does the Pancha Prana function?
Pancha Pranas anyway will function because of it is completely not gone. The ego is there in the latent state. It is not completely destroyed. Had it been destroyed, we will not wake up. If it was completely destroyed, we will not wake up. And if it was completely destroyed, we will be in the pure self then.
Right.
It's not completely destroyed, and that is how it holds on to that. That is how we wake up. Because ego is there, but it is not completely destroyed. It is in the seed form, unmanifest state, but it is very much there.
Right.
Swamiji, we are new member. I can see one Prabodh Shetty. If he has any question.
He is from Bhiwandi.
Acha. Prabodh, you have any question?
No questions, it seems.
You can unmute and ask.
So he is new to this the Vedanta, so he's listening.
Okay. Okay, then Swamiji, we can start end the
Okay,
session today.
we can conclude then.
Yeah, yeah.
Om Purna.
Hari Om, Swamiji, unmute, please. Please unmute, Swamiji.
Hari Om to everybody.
Hari Om,
Hari Om,
Swamiji.
Swamiji. Hari Om, Swamiji.
Hari Om.